Everyone. So I just wanted to start by thanking Mark so much for being here with us tonight. Some of you may remember Mark, the Ohev folks, from when he conducted a big survey at Ohev. I think I was like on maternity leave or just returning from maternity leave. Yeah, so that would have been about 2.5 years ago. But he really is the leading researcher on all matters relating to Orthodox Jews, and I think has done some extraordinarily thorough and valuable research for us in this regard. And I'm very grateful to him. Yeah, I'm just gonna mute, if everyone can please mute your selves. We're truly grateful to Mark for offering a lecture tonight. And when he sent the possible topics, I really jumped at the opportunity to have him speak about who owns modern Orthodoxy today, because I think that this is something, I know we've got folks from a number of different communities here tonight, 2 of whom are my parents, which is awesome. Welcome, thanks for coming. That was a surprise. But you know, speaking specifically for a moment to Ohev Sholom, the question of, you know, we are an Orthodox shul, and I think in some ways, part of our identity is that we often do things differently than many Orthodox institutions. And, you know, you can chicken egg the argument of how that came to be, but I think at the end of the day, this is a really important question when the communities are always evolving and adapting of what is modern Orthodoxy. And also I know that another pressing question in our community is the question of day schools. And so those were the 2 I thought that would really benefit us a great deal. So he's gonna do some initial presentation, and then there will be lots of time for questions. You can pose questions in the chat, or we will unmute. So here's what the structure I've been using until now is that if you have questions during the presentation, please send them in the chat so that we aren't interrupting Mark, and then I'll just jump in, and if there are clarifying questions or what have you, and then we'll save the more content related questions for the end. Mark, does that sound good for you?
Yeah, that sounds good. I would say post your questions in the chat box. I will be looking at the chat box while I'm speaking. I love multitasking, so I'll read your question and I'll possibly answer it, or we'll wait till the end. But either way, it'll
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thanks again. I'm going to mute myself now.
Okay. So yeah, hi everybody. Good evening. I am not at the Kotel. I'm in West Hartford, Connecticut, if any of you are familiar with that area. So yeah, as Ruth mentioned, I did speak in your shul, I think it was January 2018. I had previously done a survey of your shul members, so I know your people a little bit. Your rabbi was my son's classmate at MTA, Yeshiva University High School. So I've known Shmuel since he was a teenager. And you know, we've done a lot of research since. So this has been a retirement project for me. I've been doing this for 5 years. And just to go, you know, my goals quickly are, our community needs research that hasn't been done. It needs independent research done by people with no agenda, who are willing to ask questions that maybe some organizations might not be open to asking. We try to do quality research, make it affordable, which means most of what I do is basically done pro bono or at a very low cost. And we try to make everything available. So all the research I do is on my website. Everything is on my website. If you go to, I'm named Nishma Research, N-I-S-H-M-A. Nishma in Hebrew means we listen. So the purpose of the research is to listen to what people say. If you go to nishmaresearch.com, you will find everything there, downloadable and readable. You know, we've done 6 major surveys. The first one we did was a survey of people who have left Orthodoxy. Sometimes it's called off the derech, people who have gone on their own path. We did that in 2016. In 2017, we did a very broad survey. I kind of tried to do a Pew survey, but for the Orthodox Jewish community, a very broad survey. That's the one that I spoke about in January 2018. Last year, we did 2 surveys. One, so modern Orthodoxy, our ethos, the way we practice our religion is we participate in secular society. We don't do it because we have to for money or for other reasons. We do it because it's part of who we are, and we do it a priori. The Hebrew term would be lechatchila. We do it a priority. It's part of who we are and how we define ourselves. So the question is, how's that working out for us? Does it enhance our lives as Orthodox Jews? Are there challenges? So one of the studies I did last year was on that. And the other study, surprisingly enough, there has been a lot written about Ba'alei Tshuva, people who become Orthodox, become observant, not growing up with it, but at bar mitzvah or later, or college or later. And although everyone writes about it, nobody's done a survey of these people. So we did that survey also last year. Why would somebody become observant Orthodox? What was the nature of that journey? Were there challenges? What were the challenges? What's been the nature of the continuing journey since becoming Orthodox? What do they want the rest of the community to know about them? And finally, I did 2 surveys this year. The first one was a survey, which both of these are surveys that were suggested to me. I did a political survey, and the goal of my political survey really was, everyone talks about the Jewish political ideology, but when you talk about Orthodox, you kind of get all mashed together. And I've always felt that the modern Orthodox are different from the Yeshivish or the Hasidic, what they call the Haredi. So the purpose of that survey was to explore the differences politically within Orthodoxy. And finally, the one I did most recently is titled Health, Emotional, Financial, and Religious Impacts of the Coronavirus Pandemic in the Jewish Community. So there's a lot there. Everything is out on the website. So when I spoke to Ruth, she suggested one of the ones that I've talked about recently is the question, who owns modern Orthodoxy? So most of the talks I do are pretty clear cut. Somebody wants to know about, why do people leave Orthodoxy? And I have to have a survey that looks into that. Why do people become Orthodox? What are the views about women in Jewish leadership roles, including the rabbinic roles? So for all of those, I go to my survey and I pull out the results. But the question of who owns modern Orthodoxy, I had to really think about that. How am I going to answer that? How am I going to pull stuff together from all my surveys to kind of shed light on that question? And then the other issue we talked about, Ruth, was Jewish education. Modern Orthodox views about educating their children, what kind of schools they send their kids to. Are those views changing? What do people think of Orthodox Jewish day schools? So those are the 2 topics we picked for tonight. And as you mentioned, I've been told that Zoom lectures are kind of difficult on the audience to kind of watch somebody on the screen for 40 minutes. So I think the idea of posting questions in the chat box and covering them as you go through it will be kind of interesting. So is this an intentional distinction between open Orthodoxy and modern Orthodoxy? So when we ask people, are you Jewish? Yes. Are you Orthodox? They said yes. And then we asked them, are you Hasidic? Are you Chabad? Are you Yeshivish, Aguda? And the 4th question was, are you modern or centrist Orthodox? We use the wording modern or centrist because the fact of the matter is that there is no real consensus on what modern Orthodox means. So I asked one woman, are you modern Orthodox? And she said, no, I'm not, because I keep my hair covered, which is true of many modern Orthodox, but is not true of also many modern Orthodox. So in her case, when I switched it to centrist, she said, yeah, I guess I'd view myself as centrist. I do, in the survey that I did in 2017, I did ask people at one point, you said that you are modern or centrist Orthodox. Which of these 5 categories within those do you peg yourself in? And one of them was open Orthodox. And in the analysis and the study, for most of the questions, I do subdivide modern Orthodox. I will look at open Orthodox, liberal modern Orthodox, centrist. So it is not it's not, the question of, is it an intentional distinction between open and modern Orthodoxy is one that we'll try to get to in some form or other. So let me just start with, so modern Orthodox, there's 15 million Jews in the world, and there's 7 million in the US. Of those 7 million, 4% are modern Orthodox, 300,000. And I might have said this, I think I did say this when I spoke in Washington. It's a line that I like to use. What I said was, I think I said was that you could take all of the entire modern Orthodox community of the entire United States and fit them all into 5 National Football League stadiums on a Sunday afternoon. Everybody, the entire community. We're a very small community. And the reason I'm telling you how small we are the smallest community within all of Orthodoxy. The Haredi are double the size. They're about 600,000. And then, of course, the Reform and Conservative are much larger. So not only is Modern Orthodox the smallest segment, but I'm pretty much convinced that we have the widest diversity of opinion within our small group of any segment of the Jewish population. We just have what I call a very big tent covering a real diversity of people. So in talking about who owns Modern Orthodoxy, first of all, what is Modern Orthodoxy? So I defined it. Modern Orthodoxy is that branch of Orthodoxy that specifically says that we are going to have an interaction between our Jewish knowledge and our secular knowledge, between Jewish ideas, between philosophy. We accept science. We accept science. If we need information, medical information, we go to doctors. We go to scientists. We accept the secular world, and we understand that the secular world has knowledge that we may not have. This is different from the Hasidic world, in which in the yeshivish world, many people will go to their religious leaders for questions that we would normally go to a business person, a scientist, a doctor. They have a view called Da'at Torah, which is that all knowledge from the Torah channels through those people who are closest to the Torah, which would be their rabbis. So that's a difference. Okay. So I mentioned that I'm going to share my screen a couple of times. I find that doing a PowerPoint, I most often talk on Shabbat, so I don't have a PowerPoint, which actually is a lot nicer to talk with people face to face, as opposed to having a clicker and clicking through slides. I left the business world, and I really felt that PowerPoint is kind of more a barrier than anything else. But I did want to show you a few of these slides. And the first one I'll show you, let's see if this works. I'll show you my desktop and I'll show you the PowerPoint. Okay, here we go. So the first one, if you can see that, can you see that? Okay, can you see, how's that? Can you see that? Yeah, okay. So this is the question I asked. You indicated you're Modern Orthodox or Centrist Orthodox. How do you label yourself? And I was very pleased to see that, first of all, there's a huge diversity across from going from left to right. It is kind of close to a bell curve. Liberal Modern Orthodox, left of center is about 1/3. Centrist Orthodox and right centrist is about 1/4. I think that this reflects diversity within the community. People ask me, is this representative of the community? In fact, if you were to go to all 300,000 Modern Orthodox and ask them this question, would it be like this? Are you overrepresenting? Am I overrepresenting the left? I think the answer to that is probably yes. It may be more like a bell curve here. You still notice the left is kind of a little bit more than the right. But the bottom line is that people do cover the spectrum within Modern Orthodoxy. A couple of observations. When I asked this question, 93% of the people were able to answer it. There was no other, I didn't define it any more than this. I gave them the 5 categories. The one on the lower right, right centrist, I did say, are you right centrist leaning toward yeshivish? So I did define that a little bit, but people kind of have a sense of where they are. 93% of the people were able to explain, to pick one of these 5 categories. And of the few that didn't, most of them said, I don't like labels. A handful said, I don't know. A few people said, I'm a combination. One person said all of the above, which I would like to meet that person because that was kind of strange. But so the first observation is that we are really very diverse, extremely diverse. Okay, so we're talking about ownership. The question is, who owns Modern Orthodoxy? I think the first thing we have to kind of figure out is, what does owning mean? What does it mean to own something? To me, owning means I pay for it. I'm responsible for its maintenance. So, okay, who pays for modern Orthodoxy? I don't know. We each as homeowners, as household people, pay for our expenses. We may pay for shuls. It's very much spread throughout the community. Who's responsible for its maintenance? We're not like the church where there's a centralized body that covers many of the expenses. Who is responsible for its continued existence? Ownership is also responsible for its continued existence. I think these are things that in the Orthodox community are spread among the community. Ownership means having the authority to define it and the rules under which it operates. So who owns the Boy Scouts? There's a centralized group that sets rules. You're in and you're out. And they've had some changes over the years due to societal pressure, but basically ownership is paying for it and really defining who's in and who's out. So who is in and who is out? So I know that when I was driving past the Jewish Community Center and I was going through the parking lot, and I just noticed out of the corner of my eye, I saw somebody. I said, "Oh, that's my boss. I worked at the Hartford Insurance Group." And you recognize your boss. I think people, you have a boss, you know who your boss is. So one question I would say is, who owns modern Orthodoxy? Who is the boss? I'm going to give you one that I kind of cheated on. This one will be easy for you. Okay. So here are some people that I will point to and say, is this the person who's I'm going to show you something in a second. So, I mean, you could say that the boss of modern Orthodoxy is the Torah. We listen to the Torah, or it could be the Shulchan Aruch, the Talmud. Okay, so in some sense, yeah, the religion is owned by the theology. Do people abide by that on a day-to-day basis? Somewhat. So maybe the boss. Who are these other people that I would ask you? Do you view any of these as your boss? These are all. I will tell you. These are all bosses within the Jewish community. These are all people that have a huge following. These are all people that are very, very, very widely known by many, many people. And these are all people that some would say, yes, I go to that person for guidance, and I go to that, and I view that person as responsible for the continuity of Orthodoxy. Do we know who any of these people are? Let's see. This is the head of the Lakewood Yeshiva. Anybody know who this is? I should open the chat box. Okay, so this is Rabbi Schachter from Yeshiva University, an acknowledged expert of law in modern Orthodoxy. Rabbi Dratch from the RCA, 1,000 rabbis, part of his organization. This is Mark Bain, the head of the Orthodox Union. Who's this? This is your rabbi. So many of you would say that this person is your spiritual leader. When you're asked who owns your view of modern Orthodoxy, you would say Reb Shmuel, and that would be your answer. It's not the Satmar Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Many of you would say, I read the writings of Rabbi Sachs. Okay. Finally, are any of these Jewish organizations, do you view any of these Jewish organizations as owning modern Orthodoxy? The reality of it is, and I'll show you some of the statistics, the reality of it is, whether you're a member of the Orthodox Union or Yeshiva University or the National Council of Young Israel, when we ask people that question about these organizations, people do not view these as owning modern Orthodoxy. So where do we stand now? We stand with a group that's extremely diverse, where people define themselves, where people go to secular experts for knowledge. So, we don't really have a question that addresses directly this issue of who owns modern Orthodoxy. The closest I could come up with is the following, which I found very interesting. So, in our survey, we had a few questions on the issue of Taharat HaMishpacha, which are the laws of family purity, dealing with women going to the mikveh, which you're probably aware of. And the question we asked was, among women of of the relevant age, we said, when you have a question relating to this topic of Taharat HaMishpacha, where do you go for answers? Now, I can tell you this, in the old days, and I find the old days is kind of like when I got married, I have my 50th anniversary coming up in 2 months, September. So, you went to pretty much everybody went to their synagogue rabbi, not a very large percentage. And my hypothesis in asking this question, I should open up the chat bar. My hypothesis in asking this question was, is that still the same, or are people really? Is there just a huge variety in who people go to? Now, this is we're talking about an important halachic questions. A person has an important halachic question. Who do they go to? So it's interesting to see that the two that had the highest level of response is, so 28% said, I ask a US at halacha, and this is a woman who has been very highly trained to respond to questions of this type. This did not exist in 1970. 28% also said, I find the answers myself. Who do they go to? Who owns them halachically? Google or Wikipedia? I've heard people refer to Rabbi Google jokingly, but the fact of the matter is people are using it as a resource to answer questions. Does that mean that Google owns their brand of orthodoxy? But if you look at the rest of them, you can see that these answers are kind of all over the place. I asked my husband, I asked my synagogue rabbi, I asked the wife of my synagogue rabbi, another woman on Mishul's clergy staff. So, to me, the question of, so I view this as kind of democratization. So in other words, just a huge variety in where people go for answers on halachic questions of this type. Also, we just finished a survey on the coronavirus, and one of the questions we asked is, have you since this pandemic started, have you reached out more broadly than in the past to institutions outside of your local synagogue community for Jewish classes, information, spiritual guidance, and participation? So as of May, as of 2 months ago, 1/3 said, yes, I've been reaching out more broadly. So these are people who at one time, their religious experience was primarily in their own community. And as of 2 months ago, which is a long time ago in the pandemic age, 1/3 had already said, no, I'm reaching out more broadly. I now have multiple rabbis. I have multiple sources for education. I have multiple sources for halachic information. I talked about the communal organizations, the Orthodox Union, Yeshiva University. So when we asked the question, when we ask questions about how people view these organizations in terms of providing religious leadership, the same 43% said I agree that these organizations meet my religious needs, and 40% said they don't meet my religious needs. This is a very half-hearted response as to how important these organizations are to people religiously. Similarly, do they provide leadership on issues? 40% said yes, they do. 41% said no. We have found, and we asked people, there was a question about it, are there messages you would like to give to your organizations, your communal organizations, as to what they should be doing or not doing? And people, many people said, just tell them to give us advice and not butt in too much. So, but there's definitely kind of there's some value in these organizations, but it's also hands-off. It's also kind of a don't tell me what to do. So I think a very half-hearted agreement that these organizations have kind of ownership within modern Orthodoxy. So in summary, I'm still sharing this. In summary, there's just a lot of variety in how people view themselves within modern Orthodoxy. That makes us a hard group to own, because you ask two different people, who do you go to for advice? You get two different answers. You ask two different people, who do you feel decides who is in modern Orthodoxy and who is out? Who decides that I'm Orthodox or I'm not? You'll get two different answers. You'll get disagreement. Just a lot of diversity. Even within the organizations, you have the RCA, the Orthodox Union, Young Israel, Yeshiva Chovei Torah, International Rabbinic Fellowship, Torah Chaim. These are all organizations that have different views, a lot of communal fragmentation, a lot of different shuls. I asked one rabbi who owns Modern Orthodoxy, and he said, do you know how many shuls there are? You go to 20 different shul websites, and every one of them will be different. The rabbis will be different. The rabbis will look different. The pictures that they post to their members will be different. The list of classes will be different. And people are picking the shul that they want to be a member of. And ultimately, who owns it? The ownership is at the local communal level. The rabbi of a shul in Birmingham, Alabama, he's the local person who kind of decides how that Modern Orthodox community works. I mean, there is still a question: how far? And this is a question that I get asked a lot: how far can rabbis and individuals stray from communal norms and belief and practice and still be Modern Orthodox? Well, all I can tell you is we are still a very big tent. And sure, there are people who say that someone is too far to the left or too far to the right. There are people in the center who think that the people who are more to the right are not Modern Orthodox, they're yeshivish. There are people in the center who think people who are open Orthodox, as you may have heard, are not within their definition of Orthodoxy, but we're still a big tent. And in a presentation I'm giving next week, I call it the tiny big tent, because you need to remember, we're a very small group with a wide range. So it's my conclusion on who owns us is it's we the people, okay? We the people, just like it says in that famous document. We decide, okay, with that comes some responsibility. We have to continue to reach out to each other. We have to continue to talk among ourselves, as somebody else said. And so that's my answer to the question of who owns Modern Orthodoxy. We, our synagogues, our rabbis, not really any national organizations at this time. So, for some reason, the chat box, there it is. Okay, the chat box didn't, okay. Yeah, so can you describe or define the left-right labels on the first chart? So as I mentioned, interestingly enough, I threw out the five categories were: are you open Orthodox? Are you liberal Modern Orthodox? Are you Modern Orthodox? Then are you centrist or centrist Orthodox? And then the last one was, are you centrist Orthodox tending toward yeshivish? Those are the five. That last one was the only one I had to define. I did not have to define modern or centrist. Centrist has really been defined by Yeshiva University. They kind of defined, people kind of understand what that is. As far as the question, where are the Maharats Rabbanits? So if you're talking about the chart and where people go to for a question on Taharat HaMishpacha, so one of the choices was a woman on the staff of a woman who's part of my shul's staff. It doesn't say, we didn't use the titles. I will tell you this, and that is that we also asked in that survey in 2017, we asked a whole series of questions about, do you agree that women should have a stronger role in Jewish education, in Jewish organizational leadership, in Jewish Torah teaching? And we also asked, do you agree that women should have a stronger role in within the clergy of their synagogue? I forget the exact words, but that was basically what it is. And then if people said, yes, they should have positions, they should have such positions within the clergy staff, we then asked, should they have a title commensurate with that? And if we combined the two, it ended up that 20% of all 20% of everybody said yes. They basically said there should be women rabbis. They said, yes, I strongly agree women should have that role, and I strongly agree they should have a title. Another 20% somewhat agreed, which means they agree that women should have the role, but they were not sure. They tended to agree about the titles. So we did not use the title Maharat or Rabbanit, but we did say, should these women have a title reflecting their rabbinic authority? And the words rabbinic authority were in quotes. Shmuel Andrews, yeah, I was in a hurry. I actually okay, so you might find this funny, but I'll show it to you very quickly. But I actually, can you see this? I actually superimposed your rabbi's photo. Anybody know who that is? So Ruth, you probably know who that is.
That's Natty
That's
Healthcare.
That's Rabbi Helfkat. He is the head of the International Rabbinic Fellowship. So he's
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Well, he was. So he was your rabbi's boss, so to speak. But I thought I would kind of make this a little bit easier for you to answer. But yes, definitely in the shuls. I've spoken in several shuls. I spoke the very last shul I spoke at was the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale, and I stayed at Rabbanit Bracha's Jaffe's home. It was totally wonderful, and we attended her classes. They were great. The questions about politics. Somebody said the questions are about politics, about the level of observance. So we can come back to that because I'm not very clear. Yes, in your COVID study, did you find differences between modern Orthodox and yeshivish in dealing with the virus? Yes, there are some really, really significant differences. The yeshivish people had many more of them have had the virus. They live in compressed communities. But they're less worried, and they might be less worried because they've at that point they'd been through it more. In terms of taking care, there was not that big a difference. Shuls, modern Orthodox shuls have a lot of online davening. The Haredi don't. Modern Orthodox shuls have a lot of online classes. The yeshiva shuls also do that. They have a lot of classes, and the people who responded, almost all of them have the internet. So I don't know what the deal is with their staying away from the internet, but they all said they have the internet and they all go to online classes. So there were differences. They were more heavily hit financially. They have larger families. Okay. Where on the spectrum is a modern Orthodox shul with a leading female rabbi? So that's a hard question to answer. I'm not aware. I know that there are a half a dozen or so modern Orthodox shuls that have a maharat or a rabbanit who functions as the female rabbi, and I think I know that all of you have strong roles. So the question is there a shul where you ask somebody the question, who's your rabbi? Would they say that, would they name you as the rabbi? I think people would name both of you. Mm-hmm. So it's a hard question to answer.
Karina Fruchter points out that her daughter Dossie has had a shul in Philly
in Philadelphia, right? Yes.
Right.
So she left Maryland.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She left Rockville and opened up. Yes, that's right. She opened up her own shul in Philadelphia. That's true, and I know that because my daughter lives there. Okay.
Tibble.
Shul, not shut. Is there a typo here? Maybe there is. It says shul, not shut. What is the bottom line for the most left liberal modern Orthodox shul? Oh yeah, there you are. Okay, so I know your daughter has a shul in Philadelphia. Okay, so let me go on to the next part of the talk, and that is education, Jewish education. So let me just start before I get into education for children. Let's a quick review of education among adults, because Torah learning is important. So, it turns out that modern Orthodox Jews do spend a fair amount of time in their Torah studies, men and women. So among men, a majority engage in Torah studies at least a few times a week. Among women, a majority engage in Torah studies. Almost two-thirds engage in studies once a week or more. What I found kind of interesting was that in terms of the topics, there's not much difference in who learns Parsha and Tanakh, the weekly portion, Halacha, Jewish law, Musar, laws relating to how we should behave Jewishly, men and women about the same. Jewish issues relating to the modern world, men and women about the same. The one area where there's a difference, not surprisingly, was in Talmud, Gemara, Daf Yomi. But it was interesting that that 10% of the women do learn Gemara. So when I talk about the strengths and weaknesses of modern Orthodoxy, one of the strengths that I mention is the fact that that Torah learning is important to us. So we asked the question in our survey. We listed 27 items, and we said, do you regard the following as problems facing your Jewish community? And the one that, by a very, very, very wide margin, the one that came out on the top of the list as the most serious problem was the cost of Jewish schooling. 89% said it's a serious problem. 97% said it's either a serious problem or somewhat a problem. And what's interesting is that this is true for everybody. Open Orthodox, liberal, modern Orthodox, all the way up from left to right, older to younger. People ages 25 said this. People ages 75 said this. Men and women, everyone views it as a problem. And you can see some of the quotes here: the cost of educating my children, the stress it causes us as parents, takes away from whatever benefit they have going to a Jewish day school. My daughter in Philadelphia has 4 kids at the Abrams Academy. You're probably familiar with Abrams, and it's stressful. I mean, she was just, for the past week, she's been stressing about how to afford putting the 4 of them on the bus, but it's definitely stressful. So we do recognize that when we talk about Jewish education, you have to recognize from the beginning, we recognize that it's very expensive, and that is a stress point. So we asked people what kind of school their children attend. So this is for people who have a child. We said, do you have a child in grades 1 through 12? And people said yes. And then we said, okay, please think about your oldest child in grades 1 through 12. What kind of school does that child go to? So this gives us a picture of where people were sending their children in 2017. And you can see 83% sent them to an Orthodox Jewish day school. 83%, 5 out of 6. Another 8% went to a community or non-Orthodox Jewish day school. So now you have 91% going to a Jewish school. And then the other 9% would go to a variety. People at that time, nobody really commented on this. Some people thought that 83 was kind of dropped over the years. Some people told me that, it used to be that if you were modern Orthodox, everybody sent their kids to a day school. And I've seen in my community where people, where that was true 30 years ago, and now it's not. I mean, the guy who's just behind me sent his kids to public school. A guy on my bench sent his kids to public school in a very strong Jewish home, to the point where one of their kids ended up becoming a Jewish school principal. But there's a feeling that the 83% has kind of dropped over time. Maybe it has. That 83%, this 83% here, Orthodox Jewish Day School, I did break it out in 2017, and it does vary by where people are within the spectrum. So those people who define themselves as open Orthodox or liberal modern Orthodox, those 2 groups on the left, 71% sent their kids to an Orthodox Jewish day school, which means 29% did not. A lot of those 29% might have gone to to a community school, not strictly Orthodox. And then if you go over to the right, the centrist, the rightmost group, 92%. So there's definitely a variation in that across the spectrum of modern Orthodoxy. One of the interesting questions we asked in 2017 was, we said, okay, so you told us that your child goes to an Orthodox Jewish day school. How do you rate your school on the following? Your Orthodox Jewish day school. Do they encourage the kids to go to college? Yes, 91%. Do they give your child strong Jewish studies? 70%. I don't know. Strong secular education, 60%. I don't know. Do they do a good job teaching your child midot, the proper Jewish behaviors? Now you're down to 50%. Do they teach your child to think critically? 46%. Do they meet special education needs? 32%. Not surprising. Orthodox Jewish schools are often not set up to meet special education needs, and they will tell parents, to be honest, we can't meet your child's, all of your child's needs at this, the way we're set up in our school. Do they do a good job teaching tzniut, which is proper dress? Only 22% said, yes, I agree. And a good sex education program, only 22%. So I don't know, as far as the report card is concerned, I would say that this is kind of, I don't know, B-. I'm being generous. But I mean, people are generally somewhat happy with the schools, but if you look at the areas, you know, 61% agree some. Now you could add the agree fully and agree somewhat, and then the numbers are higher. So strong Jewish education, 95% agree fully or somewhat. Strong secular, 90%, 97%. So yeah, I would say maybe maybe if you combine, I agree fully and I agree somewhat. So people generally are pretty satisfied with their school. So, you know, so this is what's costing. This is what they pay for. Certainly, it's a lot of money that they pay for.
I don't have an answer for that. Is there something else I can help with?
No.
Okay.
I think Siri thought I was talking to her, if you heard that. Okay, so this is from our survey that we did last year. We asked the question, do you agree that the schools in your Orthodox community are successful at creating committed Orthodox Jews? And it's interesting that 55% agreed, but 34% disagreed, which is kind of, you know, so yeah, I mean, it tends towards agreement, but to me, that's kind of a disturbingly high number that don't really agree with that. Modern Orthodox schools have access to an adequate supply of skilled modern Orthodox educators. 48% agree. Yeah, teaching does not pay a lot. In a good school, it pays, and it may pay relatively well, but it doesn't pay as much as you'd make as a doctor, lawyer, or a finance person. And the result of that is that in many modern Orthodox day schools, the teachers tend to be more often tending towards the yeshivish end of the spectrum. So that's what this question addresses. Do the schools have access to enough modern Orthodox educators? Split 50-50. On the other hand, I consider the cost of my children's Jewish education to be money well spent. 70% agree. And if you look at the liberal modern Orthodox wing, 2/3 agree. So people do think that the money is well spent. And finally, eventually sending my children to a public school might be an option to consider. So here you're talking about the future, everything you're dealing with, the cost. And although only 14% agree fully, if you add together the agree fully and agree somewhat, it's 31%. So I mean, people, it's a challenge. It's a financial challenge. It's a lot of money, and people feel they're getting value out of it. 70% agree that they're getting value. It's well spent, but it is a lot of money, and people are struggling. The last slide I'll show you, and then I'll go back to see what the chat box says, is so this is the coronavirus. We asked, the survey we did just very recently, we asked people, what kind of school does your child go to? And 84% said a Jewish day school. This is and 68% an Orthodox. So this is similar to the other surveys, but it turns out that, you know, all these schools are closed. So my daughter had 4 little kids at home juggling their laptops, and I had to send my tablet to my grandson to use, and my daughter was going crazy. And now the kids are in day camp, and she's very happy. But 99% of them received 99% received the virtual education. Were the parents happy with that? 32% were very satisfied. If you add in a very or somewhat, it's 80%. But still, the experience of the last few months has not been great. Because when you're spending that kind of money, And the schools didn't, I'm not aware of schools having told people we're giving you a rebate because it was virtual education. So these are the issues people are struggling with. Let me close this, check the chat box. It's 8. Okay, ooh. Okay. Okay, yeah, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Individual communities and their rabbis, Moed Asra, have traditionally been independent. That is very true. That is very true. I will, yeah. And that's the way it's always been in the modern Orthodox community. The centrist / right refer to political or observance. Yeah, so centrist, in the survey we asked, where do you define yourself within the spectrum of modern Orthodoxy? And so it was centrist, and then the last category was centrist tending toward the right. We're talking about religiously, but I will tell you this: if you look at it, if you look at where people are left to right religiously, and if you make a graph and graph that against where they are left to right politically, it fits. It fits. The left liberal modern Orthodox tend to be very liberal politically. They tend to vote Democrat by a high percentage. 90% currently would support Biden. And as you move to the right, that shifts. And as you move to the Haredi world, to the Yeshivish and Hasidic world, it's the opposite. They have about 70% Republican and about 70% for Trump. So that is that's very true. Yeah, it's 8:15 right now. It's 8:20. So what else? Yeah, what else can I tell you? Any questions? I guess we have to unmute everybody.
Folks should have the ability to unmute yourself. So
Okay.
yeah, Nancy, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my limited knowledge just takes me that Shmuel Herzfeld and Avi Weiss are open Orthodoxy, apart from modern Orthodoxy. Are there many other rabbis in America or in the world that are trying to do the same?
Well, there's a group called the International Rabbinic Fellowship, which the photo I showed you, Rabbi Helfgott from Teaneck, he was the head of it. They had, as of the last time I was aware, they had slightly more than 100 members, which means there are over 100 rabbis. If you go to the Yeshiva Chovevei Torah website, you can see a list of all of their musmachim, all of the people who went through their rabbinic program. So there are I think there are something like 130 or 140 at this time. If you go to Yeshiva Maharat and see all the women that have gone through their program, now you're talking about probably 160, 170 people who have received rabbinic ordination through an open Orthodox institution. So yeah, absolutely. And they're in all different. I've spoken in shuls and other shuls as well that have had rabbis through that program. So
I don't know if this is in your purview, Mark, but is there a tendency among these 100 or so rabbis to favor decentralization of rabbinic authority?
You know, I think there's a tendency among these rabbis to favor acceptance of independent views. In other words, these are my views are valid, my views were taught to me by the yeshiva. I can refer you to our Rosh Yeshiva who can explain more, but I respect your views, you respect my views. If an attitude of acceptance of variations within our big tent is independence, yeah, they don't, yeah, I think you can say yes to that question.
Thank you.
Helene, go ahead.
Rabbi, is there intermingling with reform? Do you intermingle with conservative rabbis? Do you talk with them much? I mean, do you find that different denominational rabbis intermingle with each other and can be friendly?
Yeah, so both every denomination has rabbinic groups. The RCA has a rabbinic group within modern Orthodoxy. Conservative and Reform do. In fact, the conservative and Reform movements have started discussions about melding their communal organizations together.
But did the Orthodox ever mingle with the conservative just to
Yes,
talk and
okay.
friendly?
So I would say that if you look at the center, if you look at the modern Orthodox and liberal modern Orthodox and centrist and open Orthodox, I would say the view that an Orthodox rabbi can have meetings with, can be. My rabbi is currently the head of the Rabbinic Fellowship of Hartford, Connecticut, which includes every male and female rabbi of every of the conservative and Reform synagogues. You know, I think you see that. You certainly did not see that 40 years ago, but I think
That's
you do
nice.
see that. On the other hand, if you go to a yeshivish, if you go to a more right-wing yeshivish community, you will find rabbis who are willing to work with conservative rabbis, more or less. On the other hand, some will not. I asked one rabbi to be on my advisory group when I did the survey in last year, and he is a very, very well-known author, writer. I would say he's yeshivish, but he's worked in Jewish organization life, and he said to me, Mark, he said, you know, I would love to, but I am not quite ready yet to be on an advisory group where you publish all the names on your website with some of the people in your group who are clearly don't agree with his views. So I think the lines are blurring. I think the lines are blurring as you go from the center of modern Orthodoxy to the left. And that includes conservative and Reform. There's certainly a lot more interaction. There's just people talking to each other. You know, Israel's an issue. So we all have, so people, groups, you know, you'll have federations that have an Israel, I forget what they call them. They call them like a committee that addresses Israeli related issues. So yeah. Who in modern Orthodoxy? Okay, so you know, you might have noticed when we asked about the 27 issues that are the 27 problem areas. Number one was the cost of Jewish education, and number two was the plight of agunot, women who cannot remarry because they have not received a Jewish divorce, a get. That was the number two problem, which is amazing because number one was the cost of Jewish education, which pretty much everyone experiences, and number two is the plight of agunot, which everyone has heard of, but not that many people have personally experienced it, except for the fact that it's an emotional issue. So all you need to do is heard of one story, and you can't forget about it. It's a problem. It's kind of an embarrassment. So who in modern Orthodoxy can bring the end? And I will say this. I will say that that there are anybody in modern Orthodoxy who gets married today, 99 rabbis out of 100 are using what's called the Halachic Prenup. It's a prenuptial agreement that has been approved by the Bet Din of America, the director of which was my son's roommate at Yeshiva University. And really what it is it's kind of a guarantee. If you know anybody who's getting married, I'm sure you can ask your rabbi or Maharat Booth about it. There's a document that they both sign that really what it does is it obviates the need. It eliminates the problem of agunot moving forward. Unfortunately, it's not really accepted in the yeshivish world, but in answer to your question of who in modern Orthodox can bring the end to the agunot crisis, it remains a crisis. It's true.
It just doesn't seem possible that these different facets of modern Orthodoxy are on the same page. I just have this sad feeling that it's got to split and be called a different denomination.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you this, and maybe this is the last thing I can say. We did ask a question in November of 2019. Do you agree, I forget the wording, but it's something like, do you agree that modern Orthodoxy has become so fragmented that we will soon need to simply split into separate groups. And 31% either strongly agreed or somewhat agreed. A third. So yeah, I mean, people are to some extent kind of tired of the dissension, but we shall see. We're still like we're like silly putty. Remember silly putty? You can
Yeah.
stretch it. If you're careful, you stretch it. But if you pull it hard, it breaks. So we're stretching. Will we ever break? I hope not. It's 8:29.
I know. I see Yocheved. Do you have a last, Rabbi Heiligman, I should say. Do you have a last question?
Well, kind of a comment in the sense that my experience as a rabbi, non-Orthodox rabbi, in both directions is that personal relationships across those dividing lines are extremely important. And I've had very warm relationships with ultra-Orthodox rabbis, with a Hasidic Rebbe, with payas down to his chest, who would introduce me as the Tzedekus Yocheved, Rabbi Yocheved Heiligman. Chabad rabbis who ask their colleagues to stand and motion to me, yes, and two. There are people who will work across the lines, and what you need is mutual respect, and the liberals have to accommodate the needs of the Orthodox, and the Orthodox have to have respect for the liberals. And when that's present, I found that it's not that hard to bridge the gap and have community. So that's been my experience as a non-Orthodox rabbi.
And the rabbi you met with probably understands that the word heilig in Yiddish means holy. So.
Right, heilig.
My husband, if his name were Smith, I might not have taken it.
Right, good name. Anyway, thank you all.
Thank you so much, Mark. We really appreciate you taking the time and for giving us, what to think about, what to chew on. So, just really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And I guess I should have started this by saying it was recorded. I can't remember if I mentioned that.
Good.
So
yeah, I see it up there. If you go to my website, Nishma Research, there's a screen that says "Contact me." You can send me questions. I always respond.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful. It looks like Mark. Do you have another couple minutes to stick around?
Yes, sure.
Okay, so I see Rena. Looks like Rena has a question, etc. I need to go check on what's going on with my children upstairs, but I am going to leave it open so other folks can stay and chat. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Well, it got quiet.
I guess everybody asked their questions.
Or they're mute.
Okay. Well, okay. Thank you all for dialing in.
Yashkal.
Which shul are you the rabbi of? Yocheved?
I am officially retired, although I've started doing some work with the Dat Chaim in Randallstown, Maryland. But I left my congregation after 17 years in Columbia, and officially retired to devote myself to my artwork. Which that's
do you know what was the name of Moses' mother in the movie The Ten Commandments?
Oh, in the movie, probably John. Or something.
In the movie, her name was Yoshabel. They changed the D to an L, which is actually kind of a nice name, Yoshabel.
Yes, unless it reminds you too much of Jezebel.
I wonder about that, but anyway, I've asked other Yocheveds that, and some know it and some don't.
Yes, it's always interesting to hear what people do to it and how they spell it.
Yeah.
Including rabbinic colleagues who persist in putting a T, as in Thomas, at the end of my name, which is totally not. And it's like, well, don't you read when come on the Parsha?
Well, it's the Ch is difficult. I had a friend whose name was Yerachmiel. He was a lawyer, and they said, "What do you want us to call you?" And he said, "Just call me Rocky."
I love it.
And he had a long beard and long payas. Anyway, thank you all.
Quick question, Rabbi.
Yeah.
So I know you're in Hartford. Do you know any rabbis in Newton? Did you ever hear of Temple Emmanuel in Newton?
No, I spoke at Shari Tefillah, which is Rabbi
Right.
Samuel's.
Did you ever meet an Arnold Goodman or a Rabbi Garden Schwartz?
No.
No.
I only spoke in that one show.
But you talk with different rabbis of different faiths, just to visit, be friendly and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, what I did was I went to the, I've assembled a list of shuls. I'm up to 200 where I contact the rabbis through email, and some of them respond. So I've probably spoken to several dozen rabbis. I've spoken in 30 shuls, so at least 30 I've met face to face.
Right. The thing I love about Ohev, it's so open and wonderful, is that they accept, and because honestly, I go there and I'm not Orthodox and I'm Jewish, but they're very loving and accepting of me. So
yeah, that's great.
I don't know if you know anything about cantors. Do you know anything about Jewish cantors at all? I'll
Not
share
really.
something. My great-great-grandfather wrote the melody for the Shema. His name was Solomon Sulzer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Which melody? The one Shema. Really? He wrote that?
If you look him up, you'll find him. He was in Vienna, and his synagogue is the only synagogue that survived the Shoah, the Stadt Temple. And
what's his name? Solomon Seltzer?
Solomon Sulzer. It's a blessing. I'm bragging about God's blessing to me, and my family. I didn't do it. God did it.
Nice.
Anyway, and you're an Orthodox rabbi, right?
I'm not a practicing rabbi.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
If I practiced, I'd be better at it.
Oh,
Practice makes perfect.
You're Diana. Anyway, thank you, and God bless you. And I'm very happy that I'm Jewish, and my synagogue is very loving and accepting.
It is. It absolutely is.
And I can see you are too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. God bless.
Right. Bye.